Good morning. Is the microphone working? Do you hear it?
I will switch off when I hear that you say.
Yes, sir. Distinguished delegates, please take seats. Thank you for being in time because we would like to make some technical announcement at the beginning. Just before starting our session, please be aware that we have change in the agenda. As you know, we start with the agenda item which was postponed from yesterday. For half an hour, we will have that agenda item, and after that, we'll continue with planned program agenda items, which means that at some point, when we will have to split into two roundtables from this plenary, that time can be a bit delayed. So we will have a bit flexibility on that. Now to explain the procedure, after the plenary will be concluded in 1.5 hours or 2 hours, we'll see, half of the audience will go to room Elia and half will stay here. You see the rectangular tables with the names which will be populated a bit later. Which countries will go to the Elia room and which countries will stay here? You can see, you will see on the screen. It is rather arbitrary to split the audience onto two. No political considerations, nothing, just the mathematics. And then the same information will be on the doors. You can see, it will be printed out and you can see on the doors. So on that, we'll make another technical announcement at the end of the plenary. But now, also please pay attention to the side events, which will be during the lunchtime and later as well. And the information is, some of that is on your tables and some of that will be also on the screens outside. The transportation is provided, lunches are provided in the side events rooms. And well, I am done with my announcement. Sorry. Today our chair will be His Excellency Kostas Kadis, Minister of Agriculture and the Environment of Cyprus. And we are very thankful, Mr. Minister, because it was your duty yesterday, but we did not manage to keep time. Sorry for that. And now you have to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Zal. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me welcome you to the second day of the 9th Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference and the part of agenda item 3, which is an interactive segment celebrating over 25 years of advancing environmental performance in the region and beyond, and launching the fourth cycle of ECE, environmental performance reviews. It is my honor to introduce the panel at the podium. Mr. Bahadur Ahmadjon. Did I pronounce it well? Okay. Chairman of the Committee of the Environmental Protection under the government of Tajikistan. Mrs. Katrin Schneeberger, State Secretary for the Environment of Switzerland. Mrs. Jordanka Rodiga Jordanov, State Secretary for the Environment of the Republic of Moldova. Mr. Harry Leave, Chair of the UNESCO Expert Group on Environmental Performance Reviews. It's Leave or Leave? Leave. Yes. Mr. Adwan Nunes, Secretary to the UNESE Expert Group on Environmental Performance Reviews. And at this point, I would like to inform you, and of course, I have by me Mrs. Olga Gayerova, and thank you for being with us today. And at this point, I would like to inform you that the fourth cycle of UNESE Environmental Performance Reviews is submitted to the conference for endorsement. Now I would like to invite Mr. Harry Leaf, Chair of the UNESE Expert Group on Environmental Performance Reviews, to moderate the segment. Mr. Leaf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, of course, I would like to thank Cyprus for organizing this conference, important for all of us. And also, once again, thank Cyprus for yesterday's get together and dinner. That was a nice atmosphere, and I hope that everybody enjoyed the time during that dinner. But now, to start this segment, first of all, there is available to see on short video, mainly focusing on those concrete results of implementing EPR recommendations by the reviewed countries. So we're able to look on that, please.
Environmental performance reviews are a powerful tool for decision makers. Albania banned single-use plastic bags and is raising awareness on plastic pollution. Bulgaria has remediated dump sites, is treating wastewater, and promotes environmental protection. Croatia promotes electric cars and energy efficiency, as well as protects its biodiversity and natural areas. Georgia has introduced education for sustainable development for children, youth, and adults. Kazakhstan is improving environmental governance and advancing sustainable development. Montenegro is improving air quality across the country. North Macedonia now has more protected areas and wastewater treatment plants and practices organic farming. The Republic of Moldova has produced indicator-based environmental assessments and enhanced the monitoring of air quality. Uzbekistan is making green technical jobs accessible to women. Acting upon environmental performance reviews results in concrete changes for people and the environment. Transforming planet.
Thank you. Thank you for that short overview. That let me follow with some introductory words concerning this remarkable work. As we know, for over 25 years, the UNEC Environmental Performance Reviews support the country's efforts to improve their environmental governance, management, and the performance, thus contributing to enhanced environmental protection and increased resilience. Since 2011, the environmental performance reviews address issues related to greening the economy and financing environmental protection and education for sustainable development. Since 2017, the reviews look into the country's development to achieve the relevant Sustainable Development Goal targets. Today, a total 57 reviews have been carried out under the UNEC EPR program, and nearly 30 countries have benefited from a review of their environmental performance. Recommendations resulting from the reviews have a good implementation rate of average up to 68%, verifying from country to country and depending on topics. The number of SDG targets addressed in each review also varies depending on the content between 40 to 93 SDG targets. This year, the third cycle of environmental performance reviews is coming to an end, paving way to the fourth cycle that was adopted by the UNEC Committee on Environmental Policy in November 2020. Today, the governments of Tajikistan, Montenegro, and the Republic of Moldova have requested the UNEC to undertake the fourth review of the environmental performance reviews of the countries. So we see activities are going on, and we hope success for future in that activity as well. Thank you, and then I would like to follow with short interventions. Here, as we have here our panelists, and first I ask Tajikistan to deliver some findings through their country environmental performance reviews. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address this gathering at the 9th Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference and share our vision on environment in pan-European region. Tajikistan, as a mountainous landlocked country, forms about 60% of the water resources in Central Asia and is the main location of region's glaciers, where the bulk of the region's water resources are formed, thus playing an important role in supporting vital livelihoods of the population in the entire Central Asian region. The contribution of our country in terms of GHG emission is minimal. Nevertheless, Tajikistan, in its updated version of the nationally determined contribution, undertook enhanced commitments to reduce GHG emissions. With the global community's aspiration to achieve net zero ambition, we commit to doubling our hydroelectric capacity by 2050. We annually allocate more than 10% of the public budget for the development of the hydropower sector and will continue to increasing funding for this sector. Furthermore, we intend to accelerate the transformation of the country's urban mobility, implement national afforestation program to increase the carbon capturing capacity of the country. Distinguished delegates, the environmental performance reviews serve as a powerful tool to support policymakers in their efforts in improving environmental management and through the promotion of sustainable development. Since 2017, Tajikistan has extensively worked on the implementation of the roadmap and recommendations provided under the third environmental performance review, which included many recommendations, but to highlight some of the main is improving legal and policy framework. And we are currently working on elaboration of new environmental code, which will be a comprehensive document and will help us to effectively design effective mechanisms to incentivize greening of the economy and industry. Another recommendation was access to environmental information to the public, and we have established online access tools to all existing legal information through the new websites and information portals. On biodiversity conservation and expansion of the protected areas, it's worth mentioning that the total area of protected areas in Tajikistan has increased from 2.8% in 1991 to 22% in 2021, and which is almost 3.1 million of hectares of protected areas, national parks, biosphere reserves in the country. And we are working now on the establishing of new protected areas, and both at national and transboundary levels. And we are working on updating management plans for these protected areas. Excellencies, I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate the proposal of the Republic of Tajikistan on proclamation of the year 2025 as the International Year of Glacier Preservation and creation of the Fund for Glacier Preservation, through which we could mobilize resources for practical steps to preserve the most important resource of fresh water in Central Asia. And at the end, I would like to know that Tajikistan looks forward to work with all the partners to tackle triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tajikistan, for that intervention. As we know, sharing of international experience and expertise is a key feature for environmental performance reviews. Therefore, I invite Switzerland here to deliver their findings to that and good wishes for future. Floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to share some views on the Environmental Performance Review Program under the UNECE, which is a direct product of the second Environment for Europe conference held in Switzerland in 1993. We remember the Dobrich assessment that provided a first overall picture of the state of the environment in Europe. But ministers then decided that the countries of the pan-European region should be reviewed individually. As a result of this decision, the UNECE EPR program has been launched. It plays an important role in mainstreaming environmental considerations into sectoral policies. Beyond the assessments, the program also provides focused and tailor-made recommendations to the countries. In the course of the last 25 years, the EPR program has adapted itself to the international developments in 3 different cycles of reviews. Now entering its 4th cycle, the program adapts itself once more. It offers the reviewed countries more flexibility to address specific national environmental policy concerns. It also gives them the opportunity to choose a nexus of policies, for example, the water-soil waste interactions. Nexus recommendations aim to increase policy coherence and highlight trade-offs. In addition, the 4th cycle will also focus on the implementation of recommendations by the reviewed countries, supporting them with pilot projects and drawing the attention of the donors who might be interested to finance the implementation of the recommendations. During all these years, we all have witnessed how attractive it is, even for countries outside the UNECE region like Morocco, Mongolia, and presently Mauritania. Switzerland has been reviewed 3 times by the OECD. We can only acknowledge how useful EPR recommendations were for us to improve our environmental policies and to exchange best practices with peers. Switzerland will continue to provide financial and in-kind contributions to the UNECE EPR program, as it has done so since its very beginning. Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me finish by conveying our best wishes to the EPR program and its 4th cycle. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Switzerland, for those kind words. For future, we hope to follow effectively. Thank you. And I turn to Moldova now, just as Moldova expressed also to be reviewed the fourth time, and the floor is yours, please.
Thanks a lot. Dear participants, colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to have a floor in this event. It is obvious that nowadays world is facing extraordinary challenges, and we have to look for complex solutions in this marathon for crisis to deal with. Today is a good opportunity to look at the way we have gone and how far we have to go to strengthen the potential for sustainable development, to meet the needs of human well-being and environmental coexistence under such circumstances. Just to recall, the 8th Environmental for Europe Ministerial Conference acknowledged the important contributions of the Environmental Performance Review Program, and as an effective and practically policy tool which supports the achievement and monitoring of sustainable development goals in the pan-European region through the prism of the specific country. The third circle of the EPR is over, and the fourth is about to begin, in which Moldova has expressed its desire to participate. By implementing the recommendation of the third EPR, Moldova has taken solid steps towards systematic changes in the environmental sector, which establishing of the environmental agency and reorganization of subordinated environmental institutions. Currently, the reform in environmental sector to establish exclusive, transparent, efficient environmental governance, decision-making, and enhanced public participation are ongoing. We also listened to the recommendation of the EPR to strengthening institutional capacity, especially in the climate change sector, in the intersectoral environmental policy development. We pay focused attention to achieve sustainable solutions in the energy sector, diversifying the energy market, industrial development in accordance with the European environmental standards. Systemic changes of environmental strategic and legal background have taken a speed in order to integrate the European Green Deal policy and measures to address climate issues, to develop an effective system of environmental financial instruments and promote circular economy, as well as to address Moldova's commitments to significantly increase greenhouse gas reductions, which were expressed in 2020 under Paris Agreement, and to support European Union climate neutrality by 2050. Moldova was one of the first countries updated the national determined contributions. A lot still needs to be done. I have no doubt that you will agree with me that the green transformation is not an ultimate goal itself, but is a continuous process of changes, a new matrix of economic and social development. For this, joint actions, development of capacity, sustainable financial, harnessing of innovative solutions and technologies are of the ultimate importance. Thus, the fourth circle of EPR, which will also include opportunity to enhance review of circular economy, gender and the environment, and environmental human rights, is absolutely timely, systematic monitoring of ongoing changes and evolution of progress of ambitious plans of the country, as well as panoramic pictures of the country developments in achieving relevant SDGs targets, considering that 2030 is approaching very fast. Indeed, we see a special value in continuing to participate in the EPR evaluation, and we are grateful to UNECE and partners for this opportunity. Thanks for all your attention.
Thank you, Moldova, for your words concerning the future and your ideas to go ahead with the fourth review. Ladies and gentlemen, just following our segment, I would like to highlight that the ministers on this ninth Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference will endorse the fourth cycle of their views and invite UNEC to conduct a cycle and encourage countries to undertake further reviews. Now, I would like to turn to that poster, and we see that poster on that left hand from my, and what you can see on that poster. You can see the 4 mountains represents the 4 cycles of UNEC environmental performance reviews. The countries reviewed during mainly the 3rd cycle and the EPRs, and those eligible for EPRs by UNEC are represented as a mountains hikers carrying on the country flags to the summit. And the countries and organizations contributing to the EPRs with expertise and financially have their dents with the flags and the emblems at the base camps. That is a picture what you can see. But now we can proceed to that we approach to that poster and are able to sign with that to commit our activities in future. So here we are, and the poster is here. I invite right now here countries, as was mentioned, who were active during previous reviews, mainly third one, but also other contributors and organizations. But I start with countries. Albania, first, all 3 reviews carried out. Please come here and sign where your flag is. Next, Armenia had 2 reviews. Please come as well. And I invite the country representatives to come here and to sign concretely on that poster your signature. Please, let's start to move, and that gives me possibility to follow with list so that all countries on my list will approach to that poster. Next, Azerbaijan, also 3 reviews carried out. Next, Belarus had 3 reviews. Bosnia and Herzegovina had 3 reviews. Bulgaria had also 3 reviews and provided financial support for EPRs. Croatia had 2 reviews. Georgia had 3 reviews and provided expertise to EPRs. Kazakhstan had 3 reviews. Kyrgyzstan, 3 reviews as well. Mauritania, still ongoing at present, but will be. Mongolia had 1 review, but out of region, we mentioned that. Montenegro asked already 4th review, and provided expertise to environmental performance reviews. Morocco had 2 reviews out of our region, important also. North Macedonia had 3 reviews. Republic of Moldova asked a 4th review, so 3 is ready. Romania had 3 reviews and provided expertise to EPRs. Serbia had 3 reviews. Tajikistan, 3 reviews and asked for 1, please. Turkmenistan had 1 review, but still eligible for 2nd review. Ukraine had 2 reviews. Uzbekistan had 3 reviews. Those are countries, but now I also would like to thank donor countries on their financial and in-kind contributions, and invite you to join here and to sign a poster as well. Austria and Bulgaria for financial support, Czechia, Estonia, France and Georgia for providing experts, Germany for financial support and providing experts, Hungary, Italy, and Luxembourg for providing experts, Also, Montenegro, Portugal, Romania, and Sweden for providing experts, and Switzerland for financial support and providing. We also recognize the contribution of international organizations to EPRs, and I invite you to join with us here and sign the poster like UNEP, UN, OCHA, and World Health Organization who provided experts. Then I follow UNDP and UNICEF for organizational support, United Nations Country 3 teams for substantive support, OECD for providing experts and knowledge as well, European Environment Agency and European Investment Bank for providing experts. And finally, I also thank UNECE for making an EPRs happen and Cyprus for hosting the conference. I also invite our executive secretary of the UNECE and here representative of Cyprus to join and to sign to that poster, please. So let's all together launch the fourth cycle of the UNECE performance review for an improved environment and benefit for all, transforming planet, as that is an idea for our conference today. With that, we thank you all for your contributions and hope to work in future to improve environment and related with that also economy to be in line with well-known principles, but to try to implement that more and to look on those recommendations just on point of view implementation. And once again, I'm happy to finalize this launch now. My idea was to take a picture. I see the podium is large, but I try to be efficient. I move here. So we are ready to family photo, but somebody need to organize a little bit how we can group.
Okay.
Thank you. It seems.
Isn't it? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for moderating this segment, and also the panelists for their interventions. Before concluding, I would like to remind you that agenda item 3 will resume later today at 3 p.m. with a talk show entitled Transforming Planet, the 7th Pan-European Environmental Assessment, Key Messages to Guide the Environmental Action until 2030 and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention and your participation.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And again, thank you for being available for today's unplanned duty of you. And now we're going to next agenda item, which was planned for today morning. Agenda item 5, greening the economy in the pan-European region, working towards sustainable infrastructure. And I would ask now to the podium the chair of our next agenda item, Ms. Nino Tandilashvili, Deputy Minister of Georgia. Okay, it's also my pleasure to invite to the podium Ms. Sonia Leighton-Kohn of UNEP, Dr. Christian Rohleder, Germany, and myself. So, thank you, and now please take over.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. It is my pleasure to be here with you during this panel discussion on the agenda item that is related to the greening the economy in the pan-European region. I would like to remind you that the conference discussions under this agenda item will focus on 3 clusters of the questions, actually. So I think we are all set now and we can continue our session. So yeah, as I mentioned, this part of the session will focus on 3 clusters of questions that is related to infrastructure and sustainability, challenges and opportunities, practice and experience in sustainable infrastructure in the region as such. And the third and important aspect is measuring sustainable infrastructure in the region. All questions are listed in the addendum to the document on organization of work at the conference. I would also like to inform you that to facilitate the discussions, a thematic document was prepared by the Committee on Environmental Policy with the support of UNEC and UNEP. This time, I would like to invite Dr. Christian Rohleder, the State Secretary of the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection of Germany, to make a keynote address on greening the economy in the pan-European region, working towards sustainable infrastructure. Dr. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Presidency, Excellencies, delegates. We are in the midst of several crises at once. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is causing endless suffering. People are dying and many have lost loved ones. At the same time, the war has led to inflation and skyrocketing energy and food costs. Many in Europe and beyond are afraid that they will no longer be able to pay their bills. Giving people the support they need is a central tenet of our democracies. If people feel abandoned, they may well respond by turning their backs on democracy. And we are also in danger of losing sight of the global environmental crisis, climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and the pollution of our planet with chemicals and waste. But these crises too are getting worse. They threaten our foundations of life more than ever before. This is why we need solutions that tackle several crises at once. We need solutions that make our economy and society more resilient. Sustainable infrastructure is a key element for building resilience. Sustainable infrastructure can help reduce greenhouse gases, conserve nature, improve air quality, lower resource consumption through efficient circular economy, and promote adaptation to the impacts of climate change. Sustainable infrastructure can boost economic growth, create jobs, and encourage innovation. It is relevant for all the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to name a few areas which I feel are especially important for sustainable infrastructure. All of them need an integrated policy approach and the active cooperation of all stakeholders. Only this will ensure that all aspects are considered and ultimately lead to acceptance. Top of the list for me is the expansion of renewable energies. Germany is now advancing this expansion at full speed. In this way, we are securing our energy supply, combating climate change, and lowering our energy costs. At the same time, we are taking the needs of biodiversity into account and establishing protection mechanisms for affected species. My second area is energy efficiency. This is essential for sustainable energy, climate, and infrastructure policies. We therefore plan to expand and redesign our funding programs for the buildings and industrial sectors. In addition, we are promoting energy saving and energy efficiency with a campaign which aims to get the general public more involved in the energy transition and transformation. A third decisive area is power distribution. Expanding the electricity grids is key to this. The first priority in this context must be to optimize or reinforce existing power supply lines. If that's not efficient and new power lines are needed, Germany's goal will be to minimize the impact on people, nature, and the environment. And this is vital for acceptance and for reducing the impacts on people, nature, and the environment. The current situation brings home to us the difficulties in balancing short-term energy supply security and long-term planning. In view of the need to substitute imports of Russian crude oil and oil products, short-term supply security has become a major barrier to executing sustainable infrastructure investments. Due to concerns about shortages and significant price increases, the focus persists on short-term investments in new oil infrastructure. In this context, new oil infrastructure planning, Germany aims to ensure that these investments are suited also for the transport of sustainable fuels, such as green methanol or ammonia. In this way, synergies between short-term and long-term requirements can be gained. Another overarching challenge is adaptation to the impacts of the climate crisis. This calls for different measures in different places. For that reason, municipalities are the key actors. In one municipality, there is the threat of floods. Another faces drought and heat, while another is at the risk of forest fires. We must turn our cities into sponge cities where water is retained in the soil as long as possible. My ministry supports these efforts, including with an immediate action program for climate adaptation and a climate adaptation strategy. Finally, I would like to mention the transport sector. This needs particular attention due to its high level of investment and high emissions. We need more public transport, more bicycle infrastructure, more railways. In Germany, we already have a lot of cycling roads and a good public transport in the cities, not as good as in the countryside. But a truly sustainable infrastructure is still a work in progress and much remains to be done. Excellencies, establishing sustainable infrastructure is not just important to us in our own country, we also support partner countries in building sustainable infrastructure. For instance, the Federal Environment Ministry supports governments in Central and South Asia in gearing their infrastructure investments to the goals of the Paris Agreement and 2030 Agenda. At present, strategies are being developed to anchor environmental impact assessments more firmly in planning processes. Another project helps to accelerate investments in low-emission infrastructure. When we are all pulled together in the global fight against the environmental crisis, we can accomplish a great deal. Examples for this are the United Nations SDGs and the Paris Agreement. At the CBD COP15 in Montreal in December, we accept to adopt a new global biodiversity framework. The big challenge lies in implementing these goals. The UN ECE and especially the Environment for Europe process can make a contribution to this. Since the Environment for Europe process was launched over 30 years ago, we have improved many aspects of the environment across the pan-European regions. And for the future, I hope that together we will solve the triple global crisis. And at this point, I want to thank the Cyprian presidency for hosting this conference and pushing this process further. Your hospitality is really amazing, and your great organization of everything. So thank everybody involved in this very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christen, for your keynote address. You emphasized about the importance of energy efficiency, climate resilient infrastructure, as well as climate adaptation strategies, existence of climate adaptation strategies, and the need for the green and sustainable transport, which of course is very important. And thank you for all the important messages. Now I would like to invite Ms. Sonia Layton-Gon, Deputy Executive Director of the UNEP, to deliver a keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to my distinguished panel members, excellencies, distinguished guests in the room. Growing up in Jamaica, we craved what many of the islands now take for granted, and people of the Mediterranean particularly: electricity, so we could read and study, a constant supply of water. We wanted proper sewers, roads that weren't filled with holes, and we knew that better infrastructure meant a better life. Europe has already secured that life for so many of its citizens. Access to basic drinking water is consistently above 90% across the pan-European subregions. Sanitation, access to electricity and telecommunications coverage are all extremely high. These are incredible achievements that have grown economies, increased jobs, and improved lives. But there is a dark side to this progress. The region's vastly developed infrastructure is also one of the biggest drivers of the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. In Europe, the construction sector alone is responsible for half of all the materials extracted, half of all the energy consumed, and 1/3 of the water used. Europe's infrastructure is one of the main reasons why waste is still rising in the region and why air pollution is getting worse. And when we build big infrastructure projects, we concrete over, fragment, and degrade crucial habitats and ecosystems, destroying the richness and diversity of life that is so fundamental to our well-being and long-term prosperity. So this then begs a question to all of us. Can we really call this form of development, now that we know, progress, when the costs are so extreme, when our search for the better life leads to polluted rivers, polluted lungs, and a hotter world? When the development we crave leads to the destruction of our only life support system, Mother Earth, and the very foundation of our health and survival. So then another question arises. How do we continue to improve the lives of people in the region without undermining humanity's long-term ability to flourish as a species? Answering this question is one of the biggest challenges this region and humanity faces. A major part of the answer lies in how we choose to build the infrastructure of the future. Failing to heed the lessons from history, and we will continue fighting a war with nature that will only have one loser, ourselves. But if we can learn our lessons and put sustainability at the heart of every single piece of infrastructure we build, then we can begin to really deliver the long-term health, well-being, and prosperity that people deserve. To achieve this, we will need to begin by factoring in the cost of pollution, climate risk, and the damage to ecosystems into the planning phases of each infrastructure project. I know this may sound like a heavy lift, but enormous rewards await those with the courage to follow this path. Done right, infrastructure that puts nature at its heart can generate 3 trillion in additional annual revenues by 2030 and create 117 million new jobs within the next 8 years. Investments in renewable energy could add over 40 million jobs to the global economy while creating healthcare savings 8 times the cost of the investment. So the opportunity to begin this transition right here today is clear. European countries that have relied on post-war infrastructure dating back to the 1950s and 1960s will in any case soon need to embark on large, costly renovation and replacement projects. Existing infrastructure will also need to be upgraded so that it can withstand the climate shocks that are already, we know, unavoidable. It should give countries daunted by these challenges a real boost to know that for every euro spent on sustainable and resilient infrastructure, they can generate 4 euros in return. These massive economic gains are possible at a time when so many countries are facing economic turmoil from the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the increasingly heavy toll of the climate crisis. There are positive signs that countries are alive to this potential. Europe is a frontrunner in the global green economic transition. The need to transform infrastructure is gaining extra momentum thanks to the EU's Green New Deal, and additional funding opportunities are now available thanks to the EU's taxonomy for sustainable activities. This is starting to translate into real development on the ground. Dr. Christine gave us some examples, but there are other ones. Germany is retrofitting a 40,000 square meter department store in Berlin, creating a digital material passport for the building that aims to recycle as many materials as possible. Austria has created a vertical ecosystem for indoor wastewater treatment, a green facade enabling grey water to be reused as service water and for irrigation. The governments of Bulgaria, the Republic of Moldova, Romania, and Ukraine are restoring a 1,000-kilometer portion of the lower Danube's floodplain to reduce flood risk, purify water, restore habitat, and combat the climate crisis. These are all welcome moves, but much more needs to be done. governments, development banks, and other multilateral sources of financing must do a better job at reducing the perception that sustainable infrastructure investments are risky. Investments in sustainable and resilient projects must be prioritized. The new EU's infrastructure investment strategy, the Global Gateway, is a perfect vehicle for this. Blended funds and green bonds, loan guarantees, and offtake agreements can all help to attract investments too. And it's not just about raising finance and securing investment. Many investors say there is a real lack of sustainable projects to invest in. Education here is key. Giving people the skills and knowledge they need to incorporate sustainability into infrastructure planning and delivery will play a big part in ensuring a pipeline of bankable infrastructure projects that are sustainable and resilient. So the signs are good, but on the ground, the transformation is nowhere near the scale we need to see. The infrastructure of yesterday has taken us so far, but it is no longer fit for today. Progress is simply not possible unless it is sustainable, unless the health and well-being of current and future generations are safeguarded by the decisions we make today. And so it is my sincere hope that European countries can start to build the infrastructure of tomorrow. Under the Batumi Initiative on Green Economy, UNEP has made a new pledge to support countries of the region to develop sustainable and resilient infrastructure. Together, we can light up a path that shows the rest of the world what a sustainable future looks like, a future in which our species continue to flourish and prosper. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sonia Layton-Cohen, for your keynote address. Now I would like to open the floor for 3 minutes interventions, and I would like to invite Mr. Michalak Pacwinski, I hope I pronounced well, Director of the International Relations Department of the Ministry of Environment of Czech Republic, on behalf of the European Union. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The EU and its member states consider the topic of sustainable infrastructure as an extremely important one and welcome its inclusion together with sustainability in tourism on the agenda of the 9th Environment for Europe conference hosted here in Nicosia. As the background document rightly states, the EU and its member states support and back the concept of circular economy, whose principles are essential for infrastructure development. If we are to achieve implementation of the SDGs at the same time keep the temperature rise under 2 degrees Celsius and help protect biodiversity. The urgency of this matter is correctly mirrored in the latest global environmental policy documents. We call on all stakeholders to take action and stipulate it in the UNEA 4 and UNEA 5 respective resolutions on sustainable infrastructure and on sustainable and resilient infrastructure. On the regional level, the EU and its member states consider ratification and implementation of the relevant multilateral environmental agreements such as ESPO Convention and Strategic AIA Assessment Protocol, Industrial Accidents Convention, but also the Aarhus Convention. Upholding transparency as sine qua non for making sure big infrastructure have less impact on environment, thus being more circular and sustainable. The EU and its member states are proud to be leading on many fronts. As the background document correctly spells out, within the multilateral financial framework 2021 to 27 and our next generation EU, we have invested billions of euros in post-COVID-19 recovery with multi-billion allocations to rebuilding greener, more digital, and more resilient Europe. It is also important that we have managed to get major cities on board, as the responsibility for local development very often rests in local cities' councils. We need to move on this front as well. The examples of cities like Copenhagen, Vitoria-Gasteiz, Nantes, Lisbon, Ljubljana, or Tallinn, to name just a few winners and finalists of the Green City Award, are witnesses to the growing momentum around green infrastructure. Naming these beautiful cities, we cannot forget about the destruction and severe environmental damages in Ukraine and the need to rebuild it in line with the green and digital agenda and following the European Green Deal principles. The challenges ahead of us are immense, and we must break down traditional silos and thought and action. Take the backbone material of infrastructure, cement and steel. Their production alone is responsible for 10% of all emissions, and without a plan how to reduce their use or how to make their production greener, we are still a long way from making infrastructure more sustainable. Hydrogen-based steel production will be part of the solution, but still requires considerable investment and policy support. On the same note, the fact that more sustainable substitutes for concrete, the rust-resistant, rot-proof, and non-flammable part of almost every building in the world remain almost entirely nascent is worrying. There is one recipe that can help to cure the dependence on fossil-based building materials while finding low-carbon ways of making steel and cement at the same time. Circularity in steel and cement sectors can significantly contribute already to reducing the emissions in these sectors. The recipe is called innovations. The EU and its member states invest billions of euros within its main research and innovation funding program, the Horizon Europe, into basic and applied research, and it's encouraging to see results all around us. The imperative to increase investment for research and innovation only grows in size if we consider the sheer challenge of decreasing emissions to keep temperature rise under 2 degrees while working to protect biodiversity. Of course, the governments must not be left alone in this quest for mobilizing innovation and the desired changes in how we operate. Partnerships are needed more than ever, not least in raising finance needed to induce the profound shift from fossil fuels-based economies to sustainable business models. As the background document emphasized, the current investment gap in the energy sector on a global level is estimated at $2.9 trillion, including $250 billion annually in Europe, and EU non-climate environmental investment gaps for addressing EU air, water, circular economy, waste and biodiversity and ecosystem objectives are estimated at further 110 billion euros annually. This represents a huge opportunity for investors to mainstream greener alternatives to fossil fuels and transition to more environmentally sustainable systems and economic activities. In this sense, the EU taxonomy, which is a standardized approach to assessing sustainability of assets, represents a very good example. It is not only a huge incentive to prioritize green investments, but also a partnership between governments and businesses. The EU and its member states will continue promoting green solutions and circular approaches in infrastructure, regardless of the challenges ahead of us. We congratulate to UNECE to the courage to tackle this almost uncharted territory of sustainability infrastructure and see it as a sign of renewed vitality of the Environment for Europe process, which began in former Czechoslovakia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Michalak, for your intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Davor Percan, European Commission.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, great pleasure to address you on behalf of the European Commission. And indeed, we have heard many words on the significance of working towards sustainable infrastructure. And we indeed want to look at the question of building sustainable infrastructure in a broad perspective of a transition to a green and circular economy. This is a crucial part of the green transition as such, and a part of the response to the climate and environmental and biodiversity crises. The conditions and modalities of developing new infrastructure and also of refurbishing existing ones, which is even of perhaps more importance, need to be established by general policies and followed thoroughly in specific cases. We have also seen today that greening infrastructure is a chance to boost green economic growth, create jobs, and respond to people's needs, to provide for a healthy environment, and to address the well-being of citizens. The circular economy, transition to the circular economy makes both sense from an environmental and economic perspective. And we have heard from Ms. Leighton Kone what astonishing numbers can be achieved by applying principles of sound infrastructure management. So there is a lot at stake here. And from our point of view, we have rules that we commit to follow, and actions that we have taken forward in order to contribute to making sustainable infrastructure a reality. One, we commit and look to shift any investment from harmful to being more sustainable, and that is at the core of our policies and strategies. We have reviewed and further reinforced our sustainable finance strategy and framework. Our strategy for financing the transition to a sustainable economy, we have defined many policy areas in which we strive for improvement, and of course we have contributed. We have also brought forward the taxonomy. Then we also realized that infrastructural projects, which are very financially intense, cannot go on without the help of financial institutions and financial mechanisms. So we have heard of the importance of setting up a pipeline of bankable green projects. We have also looked at the green growth, which is to deliver sustainable, high-quality infrastructure. And I would also like to emphasize the InvestEU program, which we will give a boost to sustainable. Is that? No. Okay, to sustainable investment, innovation, and job creation in Europe. Then we also put very, very high emphasis on good environmental governance, notably environmental assessments, access to justice, public consultation, and other horizontal areas when constructing infrastructure. This is a most effective way of avoiding significant harm to the environment by new economic activities, and also identify any potential impact before decisions are made. Last but not least, we are focusing on greening cities and making investments in infrastructure in the cities, as well as improving the urban environment and the resilience of urban systems and services, the norm. With growing population in our cities, the need for our action is thus greater and makes more difference. So this is in a way, the need to direct resources to places where needs are more accurate, and also where modalities of achieving them are most impactful. Lastly, let me say that we will continue with pleasure to work in this forum and share our experience with all the countries in the UNECE region, also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davor, for giving us important examples, highlighting the priorities and also highlighting the importance of effective and efficient environmental assessment systems when we are talking about the development of sustainable infrastructure. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ruslan Strilets, Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Chair. During my speech, you will be able to see the presentation with the figures of the damages that already exist in Ukraine from Russian aggression. So, recently, our team and I visited a new forest seed center in the north of our country. It is situated just 15 kilometers from the border with Belarus, a country from whose territory hundreds of rockets were launched into Ukraine. 15 kilometers is not even half the way from Kyiv to Bucha, if you have already visited the city. Imagine opening a new seed center near the country that provided the Russian aggression with the possibility of outperform a plan to produce missiles for several Syrian wars. Even before the war, we launched the Green Country Program. This is a program of President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. The goal of which is to plant 1 billion new trees in Ukraine. The new plant in the Zhytomyr region will produce 5 million seedlings per year. And this will help us implement the program more efficiently. Could we imagine the scale of Russian invasion? No, as it is insane. Did Russia, its shells and missiles force us to abandon our plans? No, they may work even harder. Today, the Ukrainian people are united by a common goal: to repel the enemy and make our country even better than before February 24 of this year. This is why we don't stop developing for a single day, despite all possible risks, and we are already seeing the results. Before the war began, we at the Ministry of Environmental Protection were confidently implementing the European Union membership requirement. We fulfilled the environmental policy requirement for joining the EU by 61%. We created a network of nature conservation areas of European importance with an area of 8 million hectares. The Green Country Program was launched. We adopted a new climate policy. The waste management reform was launched. We began to create a system of monitoring, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emission, and etc. But Russia attacked Ukraine, used not only all its military potential, but also a nuclear treatment. What has changed since the first rocket hit Kyiv? We didn't stop working. We have already implemented the EU Association Agreement requirement by 66%. The war provided that the quality of the environment is no longer just a matter of life quality, but life safety. We began assessing the damage caused to our environment by Russian aggression. We recorded more than 2,000 cases of environmental damage. Environmental damage amount to about 36 billion euros. Let's do all these. What do all these numbers mean? This is about 3 million hectares of destroyed forest. Imagine that 3 islands of Cyprus were burned and dug up with trenches. This is about 16 million hectares contaminated by ammunition. Imagine that the area of 2 or 3 countries of the European Union was contaminated with mines. It's about 50 destroyed oil depots. This is about over 3.5 thousand Russian missiles launched at Ukraine. This is 35 times more missiles launched than during the 5 years of the war in Syria. This is about 15 operating nuclear reactors that are currently under the threat in Ukraine. We started doing something that no one had done before us. We are developing completely new methodologies for assessing all the damage caused to the environment as a result of war. And we already have 7 of these methodologies. We are developing Ukrainian National Recovery Plan. We have project for 9 major reforms in the environmental protection sphere to be implemented right now, without waiting the hostilities to end. These are the reforms of climate policy, waste management, and environmental control. All these reforms will allow us to implement the European directives within the framework of the Green Deal. We have adopted a waste management reform framework law, thanks to which we implement the 98th European directive. The law on the waste register has already been adopted. We signed an agreement on the accession of Ukraine to the LIFE program. This will help us implement projects to restore the environmental even before our country become a member of the European Union. Today, we have updated the legislation so that investors don't come knocking on our door. This door is already open to everyone interested in preserving the environment of the European continent, and for everyone interested in fighting the Russian invasion machine together with us. No more countries join us in the fight. The less likely it is that our methodologies for assessing the damage to the environment from Russian aggression will be needed by someone other than us. Thank you very much. Glory to Ukraine and our Europe.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. Indeed, the damage inflicted by the unprovoked aggression is immeasurable, and I hope that we can soon overcome this because it affects all of the Europe and the whole world as well. So thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andreas Gregoriou, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Rural Development and Environment of Cyprus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The time that this ministerial conference is taking place, it coincides with a crucial period where all countries are focusing on recovering their economies. Undoubtedly, the recovery of the economy entails the use of additional resources, especially as regards energy and raw materials. Therefore, greening of the economy is of the highest importance at this time of economic, environmental, climate, and social crisis that we're going through. The development of sustainable infrastructure by investing in green solutions based on nature must be at the core of the policies and the strategies for green development, green growth, thus contributing to the achievement of the SDGs for 2030 of the UN. The development of infrastructure is for governments an already complicated procedure, and safeguarding sustainable infrastructure includes additional challenges. However, these challenges, when they are recorded, assessed, and evaluated in a rational manner, can become opportunities for the countries of our region. On the basis of the current guideline and with the relevant legal tools within the framework provided by international and regional bodies such as UNICE, the UN Programme for the Environment, the European Commission, the OECD, the European Environmental Agency and the European Investment Bank, then the road to be followed is clear ahead of us. The adoption of holistic approaches from the initial stage of designing the infrastructures promote sustainable development and include the three pillars of sustainability. Infrastructure has to be equally sustainably, both on an environmental, social, and economic level. Thus, infrastructure to be constructed will be able to correspond to current challenges and future crises such as climate change, energy crisis, and pandemics. In conclusion, I would like to underline the main part that we all have to play in decision making for the development of infrastructure. Governments are obligated to make additional efforts for active participation on behalf of stakeholders in the decision-making process, including affected groups from the social web as well as from the private sector. It is important that our decisions are founded on valid scientific data by using tools that take into account and assess the environmental impact of infrastructure throughout their lifespan, thus reinforcing transparency and the adoption of effective policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Nazar Nureddini, Minister of Environment and Physical Planning of the Republic of North Macedonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once I would like to thank our hosts for this event, and I would like to present some of the measures taken from the Republic of North Macedonia over the last few years as a candidate country over a decade, now finally starting accession talks to become an EU member. The majority of the policies we've changed, we've actually harmonized a lot of our laws, and we're looking to do that. However, the key to implementing the laws is always building the infrastructure and having a sustainable one for our future. By that, this is the reason why last year, the Republic of North Macedonia, we enhanced our NDC to the Paris Agreement to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions by 51% by 2030. And by those, we've actually created 63 measures which will actually create a more sustainable future for our country. These 63 measures are foreseen to create green jobs and at the same time make sure that the just transition from the coal-fired power plants is done appropriately. We also are committed to decommissioning our coal-fired power plants latest by 2030 and investing heavily in renewable energy, but using at the same time, we're going to use natural gas as a transitional solution. When it comes to the infrastructure in our country, we're investing heavily in the wastewater treatment plants and the management of our waters. We're hoping to, in the next 4 years, increase the wastewater to cover 80% of our citizens and to actually be caring of our neighbors onto which, our rivers run onto. Furthermore, investing into the infrastructure and waste management. We've started our circular economy. We're hoping to achieve the similar targets of the EU by 2026. When investing in mobility, we're actually working together with a lot of IFIs to invest in green mobility, create smart green cities. The key thing we actually focus mostly on is the protected area on our country. We've increased that from 8.4% to 13.9% by creating a new national park and creating together with our neighbors, the Republic of Albania and Republic of Kosovo, one of the largest protected areas, transboundary protected areas in Europe. The idea is to create a sustainable economy out of using these the protected areas. I'd like to actually come back to the climate change issue that we all look at. We all know that the Western Balkans is actually going to be adversely hit by climate change. We're already seeing adverse weather, creating floods and droughts, and creating damages. As the Deputy Director General, Ms. Layton, mentioned, we shouldn't be looking at nature-based solution investments as a cost. We should be looking at it as an investment, because this investment is going to save the damages of the future. However, though these are the challenges we're all looking at in the long term, I think we all need to be aware of the challenges we face in the very short term. The energy crisis has hit us all very hard and made this transition investments a lot harder. I think it is a moment right now for countries like ours to work together with our neighboring countries and ask for solidarity at a time when energy is scarce. We hope that these solutions and all these sustainable developments we're looking at can only be solved if we have regional strategies and work as close neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to kindly ask all the delegates to stick with timing because it's important to finish our plenary right on time, at least to try to finish it somehow. Okay, so our next speaker will be Mr. Juhani Damski, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of the Environment of Finland. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished ministers, colleagues. Peace is a requirement for sustainability, well-being and green transition. Finland strongly condemns Russia's aggression against Ukraine. It's causing massive loss of life, destroys infrastructure, and causes unseen environmental damage. Decisions on infrastructure will have a far-reaching impact on the future. The preconditions for good living environment and sustainable development are created already in the planning phase. The objective of the government program is that Finland will be carbon neutral by 2035 and the first fossil-free welfare society. This will require accelerated emissions reductions in all sectors and stronger carbon sinks. A stable regulatory environment, financial incentives, and science-based information are important for carrying out reforms and investments. Societal decision-making must guide the green transition. While boosting the green transition, we need to be careful not to cause harm to other environmental objectives, as the do no significant harm principle states. The circular economy is broadly mainstreamed in Finnish policies. We encourage measures that reduce carbon footprint of construction and transportation. Cooperation between the public and private sector plays a particularly important role. Climate change and biodiversity loss must be taken into account in all decision-making, and we need to be aware of impacts of these decisions before they are taken. This implies that the environmental impacts need to be assessed and harmful impacts minimized. The UNECE has successfully created conventions and cooperation in developing sustainable infrastructure. I would like to strongly encourage the efficient implementation of the Espoo Convention on Environmental Impact Assessment and its protocol on strategic environmental assessment. Environmental democracy, including the public right to information and participation, must be strengthened in line with the UNECE Aarhus Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Ms. Daiva Velitskaite-Matusevic, Vice Minister of the Environment of Lithuania. I hope I pronounced it well.
Yes, I'm here. Dear Minister, dear delegates, the title of this plenary session is Working Towards Sustainable Infrastructure. Therefore, there must be an infrastructure to work on it. Unjustified and unprovoked aggression by Russia in Ukraine led to loss of 1,000 lives. Minister of Environment of Ukraine, Ruslan Strelets, informed us all about the tremendous damage done to the environment of Ukraine. Destroyed cities and vital infrastructure also witnessed the brutality of the occupant army. Dear colleagues, people of Ukraine need our support to make their live normal again. Last month, Lithuania's Minister of Environment, Mr. Simonas Gentvilas, visited Kyiv, Bucha, Borodanka. People urgently need windows, doors, and a warm place to stay as winter is coming. Therefore, Lithuania, as many other countries, I believe, in our capabilities now focuses its support on ensuring these basic conditions. But at the same moment, we foresee Ukraine free and prosperous country, living in peace, democracy, and ensuring clean, healthy, and sustainable environment to all. Damage made to environment and infrastructure has and will have long-term effects on sustainable development goals as well. The last of 17 SDGs, partnerships for the goals, is very important today. And we trust this IFE conference form as regional partnership for sustainable development, leaving no one behind. We are ready to share our experience as Lithuania has made important improvements while developing sustainable infrastructure during the last few years. For example, we have reformed national strategic planning system. Also, we created mechanisms for the development of municipal infrastructure and its financing. We also decided to transfer land management from national level institutions to self-government. All these and other changes in legal regulation leading to sustainable development are accompanied by innovative digital solutions. Digital solutions may not only help to achieve SDGs more effectively, but also be applicable when a need arises in a country torn by war, where comprehensive and complex solutions are necessary. The rational planning and design of the reconstruction and the assessment of losses caused by aggressions could be done using these solutions. We are ready to share our knowledge and expertise to rebuild Ukraine in line with SDGs, green solutions, and following the European Green Deal principles. Lithuania calls on every participant state of this IFE to show regional unity and to join efforts to help Ukraine in building back better. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Georgios Amiras, Deputy Minister of Environment and Energy of Greece. No.
Or maybe you can just take the next microphone.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Now it's great, yes.
Nice, thank you very much. Dear colleagues and distinguished participants, I'd like firstly to express my pleasure to represent Greece in the 9th Environment for Europe Ministerial and our deep gratitude to the government of Cyprus for hosting that conference. We all concede that cooperation between us is crucial for the protection of the environment, which was highlighted in Dobris in 1991, where basic guidelines established. However, the basis for achieving this cooperation is the responsibility of each country towards environmental issues worldwide. Greece participates actively, and responsibly. Somebody is doing some sabotage against me. Anyway, well, Greece, I was telling you that Greece participates actively and responsibly, and this is obvious by our imperative interventions, such as accelerating the transition to sustainable energy by minimizing the use of fuel fossils, ensuring at the same time sustainable transport, and also crediting around 38% of our National Recovery and Resilience Plan total funds for climate action, focusing, among others, on energy efficiency through a wide renovation wave for both private and public buildings. Speaking about the importance of cooperation, this is what we also seek as a government within our country. The Ministry of Environment and Energy collaborates with 21 municipalities to speed up cities' transition to climate neutrality and digital transformation by 2030. We're moving towards completion of power interconnections of our islands, the mainland grid, and we attempt to 100% decarbonize the smaller ones. We also turned a bunch of islands like Halki, Astipalea, Tilos, and some others into green innovation labs. Dear friends, it is certain that Greece promotes both green infrastructure and green solutions in general to adapt to climate change and endorses the restoration of absolute protection of sensitive ecosystems as well. We are the first country in Europe to apply a special and strict protection status for at least 7 significant mountain ranges, the untrodden mountains. That means that we have forbidden the construction of any kind of artificial surface or any kind of road in those mountains. Our new Green Public Procurement Action Plan promotes the use of environmentally friendly building materials, and the Maritime Special Planning promotes the greening of ports infrastructure. And of course, we make full use of proven tools like the environmental or strategic impact assessments that undergo extensive public consultation to incorporate all these dimensions of sustainable development right from the design phase. And of course, the ESPO Convention and the Protocol on Strategic Environmental Impact Assessment provide a useful framework and well-established practical and effective procedures for greening infrastructure, and their application should be promoted within and beyond the UN Economic Commission for Europe region. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the intervention. Now I would like to invite Mr. Charalambos Theopempto, a Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. Hope I pronounced it correctly.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, dear colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to thank you for inviting the Parliamentary Assembly for the Mediterranean, PAM in short, to this very important conference. We gather here today to discuss strategies to green the economy in the pan-European region. I have no doubt there is great potential that needs to be exploited in this area. The severe droughts of Southern Europe and North Africa during the summer, combined with the increasing ratio of extreme events that have taken place in the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions, should once again remind us of the importance of proceeding toward a more sustainable economy. Much has been done, but we have just begun our transition towards a greener economy. Investments in renewable energy and new infrastructures are fundamental. The massive investment plans initiated during COVID are clear opportunities for a successful path towards greener infrastructures. Several countries in the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions lack the funding needed to implement the transition. Enhancing investment and development cooperation will be needed to achieve such an ambitious objective. At PAM, we look forward to the unfolding of crucial infrastructural programs, not only the EU Next Generation Fund, but also the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment promoted by the G7, which can have a significant impact on our region's infrastructural facilities. Through the tool of parliamentary diplomacy, PAM has always been active in the goal of greening the economy. Aware of the magnitude of the current global energy crisis, a direct consequence of the Russian military aggression against Ukraine, our Assembly has been advocating for the creation of a Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf Economic Community for Renewable Energies, so that to increase the energy independence of our regions and also develop innovative projects such as the EastMed pipeline. At the last Global Parliamentary Forum of the IMF and the World Bank, PAM reiterated the absolute need to enhance the involvement of the private sector to design solid recovery plans. In this context, the adoption of innovative tools such as the green bonds and microfinance solutions will be instrumental in building a more resilient infrastructural system. To this end, I also wish to bring to your attention that PAM is organizing the first Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf Economic Forum to be held in Morocco between the dates of 7th and 9th of December, where the involvement of the private sector will be crucial to develop a much more economically integrated region. Dear colleagues, PAM is deeply committed to bringing forward these stances to all the relevant international fora, from the recent UNGA in New York to the upcoming COP27 in Egypt, where PAM will participate and directly contribute on behalf of its 31 member states. The current fragility in the global economy, aggravated by the devastating effects produced by the brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine, increases the hardships in achieving this ambitious goal. However, I strongly believe that despite the current dire economic and political contingency, there is not only great potential, but an absolute need for our regions to further enhance the development of a greener economy through sustainable infrastructure plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know that the topic is very interesting, but we have to close our session until 12. So I kindly ask all the delegates who will make the interventions to be as precise and as short as possible. Thank you. And now I'll give the floor to Ms. Kumi Kitamori, Deputy Director of the OECD Environment Directorate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, sorry. Good morning, dear ministers, dear colleagues. This discussion today on this theme of sustainable infrastructure is very, very timely as we are heading towards Climate COP27 and then Biodiversity COP15 in just coming weeks. As we know, according to the IPCC, the current rate of emissions will well surpass 1.5 or possibly 2 degrees of global warming within this century, leading to catastrophic impacts on human life as well as biodiversity and ecosystems worldwide. So the challenge we face is immense, and so it is time for us to act now together. Infrastructure accounts for about 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and also given the very long lifespan of infrastructure assets, the investment decisions we make today determine our emissions for years and years to come. So this implies the weight, the seriousness that needs to be attached to short-term decisions that we are making now on the types of infrastructure to build. Governments around the world are facing intense fiscal pressures following the COVID-19 pandemic, deep uncertainty linked to the energy crunch in particular right now, as well as increasing complexity of infrastructure investment in an ever more interconnected and interdependent world. The OECD is supporting member as well as partner countries to achieve both their national objectives as well as collective efforts under the Paris Agreement and towards the SDGs. And this has been done including through support to advice on policy instruments, standards, and good practices for making the right short-term and immediate decisions on infrastructure investment. And then to make sure that it is sustainable in the short and the long run, particularly for energy, transport, and industrial infrastructure. Just to give you one example, Sustainable Infrastructure Program in Asia, or SIPA program, under this, OECD has teamed up with other international partners to deliver targeted support to countries in Central Asia, where the temperature is rising at a pace that is more than twice the global average, and infrastructure needs are estimated at close to 8% of GDP. We are working closely with governments in this region to build capacities and tools such as low emission development strategies, infrastructure asset evaluation methods, approaches to development of new technology for decarbonizing industries, and the development of financing instruments such as green bonds. OECD stands ready to support countries, both members and partner countries, on this important task of ensuring environmentally sustainable infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Dr. Aniko Reitz, State Secretary of the Ministry of Technology and Industry of Hungary. The floor is yours. Okay, it appears. Yes, so we continue, and then if she comes, she can be given the opportunity to intervene, of course. Now I would like to invite Mr. Bulgar Karimov, Deputy Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Azerbaijan.
Distinguished Madam Chair, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, allow me to express our heartfelt gratitude to the UNECE for having organized such an important event, and our gratitude to the government of Cyprus for their warm hospitality. The pandemic has demonstrated quite how important it is to focus on sustainability in investment in infrastructure, in developing it, and all sectors of the economy and activity. Our economy has been under pressure as a result of the pandemic, and infrastructure projects have suffered, and we need to make sure that we develop now in a sustainable way to encourage investment in sustainable infrastructure. Otherwise, we risk permanently damaging the environment and increasing emissions into the atmosphere, which would have a harmful effect on climate change and have long-term environmental impacts. The industrial sector needs to also be reformed to make sure that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, in particular from the fuel and energy sector. The energy sector is key for us in ensuring emissions reductions and to combat climate change. We also need to look at land use and the whole of the industrial production sector. Azerbaijan has suffered from the Armenian aggression and the occupation of such a large part of our territory, which has led to refugees and forcibly displaced persons, and which has had a serious impact on the availability of resources and also on emissions in that sector. And we've seen this in objective reports. To combat climate change, we have really focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but Armenia over decades has not paid the same attention to this in the occupied territories of Azerbaijan. We have had this occupation for so many years. We have unilaterally applied the Security Council resolutions on the occupied territories and have sought to free the occupied territories. And this has noted the fact that there have been whole villages and towns which have been destroyed. We've seen infrastructure destroyed by the Armenian occupation. We have seen cemeteries and memorials which have been destroyed. We have seen forests destroyed. And the national parks have been completely untended. The occupied territories of Azerbaijan have been destroyed by the Armenian side. We have seen a real impact on biodiversity in the region. As a result of our monitoring, we have been able to see that there has been pollution caused by Armenia with different harmful substances causing air pollution. The extractive industry as well, promoted by Armenia, has had a serious environmental impact. We can even talk about an ecological disaster. The occupied territory now requires our investment as we free the territory. I would underscore that green growth in our economy is a priority of the state policy of Azerbaijan. Currently, we have adopted and are implementing a whole series of strategic documents based on our overarching strategy to effectively use water resources, to effectively combat the environmental impact of the extractive industry, and so on and so forth. We are focusing on economic growth, but green economic growth based on sustainable development to make sure that our economy can be competitive in the future, that we increase human capacity and move towards fully green growth. That is a priority for our country over the coming decades. We are committed to shouldering our obligations under different UN agreements, including the Paris Agreement. We are parties to the UNFCCC, and we have committed ourselves to lowering greenhouse gas emissions by 35%. Following the Glasgow summit, we actually identified a new greenhouse gas emissions target of reducing them by 40% in the same time frame. And major infrastructure projects are now using clean technology, using renewable sources of energy, and incorporating energy efficiency techniques. We are focusing on renewable energy sources as a priority up until 2030 with very clear targets. And we're focusing on wind and solar power. I would particularly note the priority that we're placing on the freed territories that we are freeing from the Armenian occupation, which has been in place for decades, to make sure that we can incorporate new green growth in this area by 2050. This is all being done through rehabilitating the land which has been so severely degraded, focusing on infrastructure investment as well. We've already started a program to return for the voluntary return of forcibly displaced persons to the newly freed lands. So we're seeing this now. And in some districts, we are seeing smart eco-villages which are being established, where we're focusing on cleaning the rivers and streams because they're such a vital life source for the rural populations. We are rehabilitating these water sources which have been so severely degraded by the Armenian occupation, and we urge Armenia to take all necessary measures to support this action. Ladies and gentlemen, every country must consolidate its security and peace to ensure a sustainable future, and we are fully shouldering our responsibilities to do this, taking any opportunity that could facilitate this purpose. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Ms. Yordanka Rodiga Yordanov, State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Moldova, and I would like to again kindly ask you to stick with your timing. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear participants, colleagues, today underlining the approach of green economy, we stress the importance of integrated economic and environmental policy to embrace the opportunities for economic growth while avoiding unsustainable pressure on the quality and quantity of the natural resources. This a new economic paradigm to ensure human well-being within the limits of the environment. The sustainable development is defined by means of and options of an inclusive green economy. Energy crisis pushed governments to accelerate access to renewable energy, to look for solutions for energy efficiency and sustainable consumptions. This caused the chain of changes across all economical sectors and also new environmental challenges, necessity to combine instruments against crisis and climate change. In fact, when talking about the greening of the economy, usually many associate it with the industrial changes, a new matrix of productions and consumption habits. However, sustainable infrastructure plays an equal important role here as interconnective factor, including in the cross-boundary context, which define the need of the coordinated actions among the countries. It enables to apply such legal instruments as strategic environmental impact assessment of specific projects, as well as international environmental impact assessments to ensure sustainability of choices and decisions. It should be mentioned that this summer, Moldova improved its national legal framework in this area in line with the European legal background, in order to ensure the application of European environmental standards. Clear legal framework will help to consistently mobilize existing measures and increase sustainability in decision-making, economical, territorial, and social resilience, enhance ecosystem and ecosystem services as part of ecological infrastructure, reduce environmental risk and ecological scarcity. Moldova has a program for the promotion of greening economy, which is currently being updated, implements various programs aimed to unlock opportunities for greener economical growth, enhance innovations, develop infrastructure projects with the support of the European Union and other international partners. Indeed, coherent framework of the green economy, including development of the sustainable infrastructure, is one of utmost importance to accelerate the integrated environmental approach in all economical activities, including in transboundary area, as well as to raise awareness and encourage the proactive role of society. Thus, it is important also to find the sustainability, let's say, in decision-making infrastructure within intersectoral, how to improve access to services, healthy living and well-being in the light of environmental capacity and natural capital. Therefore, today is vitally important to talk about the development of sustainable infrastructure in the context of the green transition, solving the energy crisis, protection of the natural resources, and decoupling economical growth from the environmental degradation and resource depletion, together with ensuring that nobody is left behind. To strengthen cooperation at regional level for consistent joint changes and actions to meet today's challenges, to focus on decisions which would give added value both to immediate solution and to a long-term perspective to ensuring environmental resilience and human well-being. These aspects require special attention. Green transition being challenges and new opportunities. We need to make sure that everyone can actively participate and benefit from this transformation. I'm looking forward to today's roundtable discussions with a great interest, and I wish all of you interesting and fruitful exchange of views, which will lead to important decisions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Gabrielian, Deputy Minister of Environment of Armenia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chairwoman, distinguished guests, Unfortunately, today we witnesses yet another time with the false and repeatable propaganda narratives not backed by any factual evidence and voiced here by Azerbaijan, which we repeat that serve nothing but a bold blame game for the sake of concealing its own well-documented and well-reported crimes. The false narrative and lies have no limits. They say we provoke large-scale aggression. It is so absurd that one only needs to look at the map to understand the total absurd of their narrative. But our Azeri colleagues forget that their highest authorities many times proudly praised that they solved the problems, and today included that with the use of force, and only they solve the problems by themselves, and are doing it all over again and again, claiming that almost the whole territory of the Republic of Armenia, including our capital, Yerevan, belongs to the cold, historic Azerbaijan. The realities created by the use of force cannot be legitimized, and that exactly refers to the aggressive war unleashed in 2020 by Azerbaijan with the active participation of foreign terrorists, occupation of the territories of Artsakh, countless war crimes, ethnic cleanings, threats, and aggressive posturing cannot become the basis for a lasting and, yes, sustainable settlement of the conflict. When voicing groundless accusations, Azerbaijan very conveniently forgets that exactly 2 years ago, during its aggressive war against Artsakh, Azerbaijan used internationally banned weapons, including chemical ones, aimed to targeting not only civilians, but also beautiful forests of a large area, causing massive forest fires and creating environmental disaster in place. But if you let me, I will come back to our agenda. So, for our environmental economic agenda, green agenda, for Armenia, for this moment, the main challenges are the unspecific budget differentiation and non-appraised project pipeline. Especially for infrastructure investment projects, we can clearly see that the construction of schools, hospitals, roads, dams, confirmed without any economic or financial appraisal of ERRs, net present values, and cost-benefit analysis. In case of classification of the prioritized activities, the strategic and economic assessment is not systematically done. The other challenges is it not manage project portfolio and the endless monitoring. And there is also one challenge for us. This is the prioritization of multi-sectoral projects. And I think it is very important to understand how we can come together to decide this green agenda under all these multi-sectoral projects. To all these challenges, the government of Armenia will find a complex solution, developing institutional green package of legislative acts. In this regard, green economy and development of green economy strategy has been outlined as a priority in government program 2021-2026 of Republic of Armenia. The priority goal of shaping a green economy is to make sure the economy and private sector are ready for new planned and sustainable low carbon energy reality and green agenda. To achieve this goal, it will be necessary to implement a comprehensive action plan by targeting all directions and conducting proper taxonomy. In this regard, I think our cooperation under extended producers' responsibility is very useful for us, and thanks you once again for all who are involved in that process. In April 2021, the government of Armenia approved the country national determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, declaring an objective of 40% reduction of its greenhouse gas emission by 2030 compared to the 1990 levels. Armenia aims to achieve climate neutrality in the second half of this century. The government decree of National Climate Change Adaptation Plan and the Action Plan for 2021-2025 was adopted. The assessment of investment needs for climate action up to 2030 underlines the urgency to source the financial means required and allocate them accordingly to reach Armenia's targets. Close cooperation and communication with stakeholders spanning the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Environment. And we have talked a lot about this, that this new generation and new reality, this is about this triangle. So Ministry of Environment, it is already one in the table with Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Economy. Clear carbon reduction pathways up to at least 2030, including sector-specific targets and policies, will help Armenia implement its commitments under the Paris Agreement and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And there is also one very important law of environment impact assessment and expertise. Since 2019, the Ministry of Environment has initiated the development of a new draft law on EIA based on EU relevant directives and obligations established under the Aarhus Convention and the Expo Convention. And I'm happy to say that I think at the end of the month we will be already in Parliament. So finalizing my speech, I just want to say one thing. So for us, the most innovative solution of the challenges that I have already told, this is something that Armenia already developed, the public investment management policy. And this is about project creation, project pipeline creation through appraisal of 4 criteria: social criteria as human capital creation, as risk dimension, infrastructure criticality, and the economic criteria as ERRs and net present value. So I think Ministry of Environment with this green agenda, the one who must find this balance between economy, private sector, environmental issues, and government decrees and projects. And for us, this is priority to find this balance in green economy agenda with the help of our EU colleagues. So thank you very much for everything and for this great event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Rafi Balian, Office of Environmental Policy, United States Department of State. And then I see that there is a flag from Azerbaijan, and I can only give you 1 minute for your intervention, sir. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished colleagues, the United States is grateful to the Republic of Cyprus for hosting this important meeting. The warmth of your hospitality is matched only by the warmth of the sunshine here. The United States condemns Russia's war of choice and conquest in Ukraine and mourns the tragic loss of life and the horrific destruction of nature and the environment. We remain steadfast in our support for the government and people of Ukraine, not just during their heroic struggle against tyranny, but also in preparing for their post-conflict reconstruction. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, along with mayors I met during the 11th World Urban Forum in Katowice, Poland, indicated that they would like to build back better by using cleaner and more sustainable methods and technologies. It is reassuring that UNECE member states are committed to the goal of building and enhancing sustainable, inclusive, and resilient economies, particularly through investments in infrastructure, tourism, and education. In line with the themes of this panel, I would like to share 3 highlights from our priorities in the United States. First, President Biden signed 3 historic pieces of legislation into law this year that combined will invest more than $1 trillion to improve U.S. infrastructure through clean energy, smart grids, a nationwide network of electric vehicle charging stations, and upgrades to roads, airports, ports, passenger rail, public transit, and high-speed internet. Underpinning these investments will be important good practices in environmental and sustainability action planning, particularly for projects that provide services to the people. These good practices are stakeholder engagement and public participation, access to information, and access to justice in environmental matters, so that historically underserved, underrepresented, and indigenous communities are also included in decision-making for solutions that are sustainable, inclusive, and resilient. Second, the United States was pleased to join member states at the 5th UN Environment Assembly to launch an international negotiating process to reach a global agreement to end plastic pollution. We are working with stakeholders across the public and private sectors to help reach global ambition through country-driven actions. To tackle a challenge as complex as plastic pollution, stakeholder engagement is critical, as it is for promoting sustainability and circularity. With that in mind, during the Summit of the Americas, hosted by the City of Los Angeles in June, President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken announced a new State Department-led Cities Forward initiative that will launch initially in the Americas in April 2023, which is the 3rd highlight I bring to your attention today. Cities Forward is a peer-to-peer knowledge-sharing, capacity-building, and diplomatic engagement program focused on solving urban issues ranging from sustainability to inclusion to climate resiliency through stakeholder participation. The program will facilitate partnerships between local leaders throughout Latin America and the Caribbean with U.S. mayors, municipal officials, and private sector stakeholders to address shared challenges. The path to achieving most of our global environmental, sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience goals goes straight through cities and population centers, which account for over 70% of emissions and pollution. It's at the local level that solutions are innovated and implemented. Cities Forward has 3 guiding principles. Local sustainability action plans will be stakeholder-driven and city-led. The most disadvantaged people will be the first to benefit. And 3, all solutions must be sustainable in every sense of that word, environmentally, economically, and socially. We are piloting this innovative approach in the Western Hemisphere and will take lessons learned to expand to other regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as I mentioned, there was a request from Azerbaijan to intervene. Sir, I give you only 1 minute for this intervention.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The remarks and accusations against Azerbaijan expressed by the Armenian delegation here today have no grounds. During the 30 years of occupation, thousands of Azerbaijanis have been killed. More than 1 million have became refugees and IDPs. Almost 4,000 citizens of Azerbaijan, both civilians and military, still remain missing. Armenia is a country which has committed one of the gravest crimes and genocides against the civilian population in city of Khojaly. It's hard to understand where the country which committed of such crimes take such an encouragement to voice out groundless and untruthful accusations. Armenian military political leadership was threatening Azerbaijan with a new war for new territories. And on September 27, 2020, Armenia launched large-scale military aggression against Azerbaijan, heavily shelling the military and civilian populations of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was compelled to launch a counter-offensive, a peace enforcement operation to defend its citizens. Azerbaijan fought in its own territories for its territorial integrity. The United Nations Security Council unanimously expressed its support to the sovereignty, territorial
1 minute
integrity
is
and
over.
inviolability of the internationally recognized borders of Azerbaijan and demanded the withdrawal of all occupying forces from Azerbaijani territory. So did the General Assembly. In Azerbaijan, we believe that our region has seen enough confrontation, destruction and suffering. The commitment of Azerbaijan side is there. We hope that Armenia will finally reciprocate constructively and engage genuinely into the negotiations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I see this flag from Armenia. Again, this is the last, so only 1 minute, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry to come back to that again, but Azerbaijan obviously taking the opportunity of this arena to once again confirm its offense, its occupational and its demand on our sovereign territory. It has been only for a few weeks that they have started, and it's a game, blame game that they start. They start, and then the next day they say the Armenians provoked. That's why we are protecting ourselves. But only a few weeks ago, the whole scale aggression started from their side. In 30 at the same time, bombing and shelling 39 points in the sovereign Republic of Armenia and infiltrated into our sovereign territory, and numerous demands by the international community to go back to their positions remain unanswered, and they still remain in our territory, bringing huge harm not only to our population, terrorizing not only our population, but also harming
1 minute
civilians
is
and
already
environment.
over.
Thank you for your
So we have
patience.
to stick in with the
thank you.
timing.
Thank you
That's
for
very
your attention.
important for all the delegates. To close the session, I would like to thank you all for wonderful interventions. That was really interesting to hear all the important priorities, examples, and ideas that we've heard today. Once again, thank you very much for the interventions. Now I would like to give the floor Mr. Zal for the further arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Secretariat is sorry for this, again, for the delay in the proceedings of the conference. Now, please be informed that from this point, in 2 minutes after my announcement, half of the audience can move to the room Elia, where the roundtable will be held, and half of the audience can stay here. You will see now on the screen the list of countries. Again, no politics, only mathematics. Who will go to Elia and who will stay in Zenon. And these are lists of delegations which will have seats around the roundtable, here and in Elia. The rest of audience, including any delegates which want to participate also, can sit on the chairs like now and take make their interventions with the help of moderators. Our dear moderators are Deputy Minister of Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Zulfiya Suleymanova. Directorate, Ms. Komi Kitamori will stay here in Zenon with you, and Mr. Matthew Verhofstadt, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Mr. Uroš Weigl, State Secretary in the Ministry of the Environment and Special Planning of Slovenia, will moderate the session, roundtable session in Elia. I think that's all. You can see the list here and there also on the doors. At 1 o'clock, there will be lunch break. If the discussion goes well, you are not, you can still stay in the round table discussion if you want, I mean, some of the delegates. And also you can grab coffee and go there right now. Sorry for being late. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very sorry for that.
Dear colleagues, we're about to start our roundtable. Would you please take your seats? Please take your seat for the dear participants in the roundtable. Dear distinguished delegates, we have very little time for our roundtable, so I suggest to start. It is my really great pleasure to. It's my really great pleasure to co-moderate today's session on greening the economy in the pan-European region, working towards sustainable infrastructure. As you all know, this is the continuation of the previous plenary session. And when we speak about the infrastructure, it is extremely important as the infrastructure impacts the quality of economic growth in our countries. There are several things which I very shortly would like to emphasize. I think when we talk about sustainable and green infrastructure, we actually have to think about the fact that the infrastructure is extremely path dependent. So when we're making the investment decisions today, we are actually making them for the next 50 years, since the infrastructure kind of locks in us in a certain pattern of consumption. Second aspect is that building resilient infrastructure is also important. With the climate change and with increasing frequency of disasters, of course, we want to make sure that the infrastructure is resilient, that it actually allows us to achieve our development goals. And the third one is that it is important to basically create an enabling environment to attract private investments in sustainable infrastructure. Having said that, of course, there is always a question how to address the time gap and the price gap, since the infrastructure requires upfront investments, but we see the results in a very long time period. So there is always time in the price gap. I will not be taking longer, so we actually suggest that we move to the interventions. We have a few people who have signed up. Can I give the floor to Ambassador Martin Hagström from Sweden?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Sweden aims to become the world's first fossil-free welfare nation. And we need energy-efficient vehicle, of course. We need sustainable renewable fuels to achieve the climate goals. But as you said, we also need to use the transport system in a smart way. Sweden is making historically large investments in transport infrastructure currently. The investments will, among other things, contribute to increased accessibility, regional development, improved competitiveness, and to achieving the climate goals. One initiative is to support municipalities and regions to develop sustainable urban environments. This is done by granting co-financing for municipal and regional investments in infrastructure that lead to an increased share of public transport and cycling, or to sustainable freight transports. Through these urban environmental agreements, as they are called, the Swedish Transport Administration and the municipalities also cooperate in relation to improvements of innovative and surface-efficient urban transport systems. An increased share of public transport and traveling by non-motorized transport can reduce the environmental impact and congestion of travel in urban areas and contribute to traffic safety. Many cities, not least the capital Stockholm, have invested in bike lanes that, to the extent possible, separate bikes from motorized vehicles. About 10% of Swedes bike an average day. Despite Sweden's cold climate, at least in the winter, the number of people biking to work, also in the winter, rise steadily. And I can tell you that I'm one of them. Increased and safe cycling also contribute to better public health and less air pollution in cities. Sweden has also introduced congestion charges for vehicles entering our two largest cities during peak hours. This system helps to control traffic flow and to spread travel better over the day. The charge vary between 1 and 4 euros per passage. And the income also contributes to financing new investments in additional highway developments and in the capital city, an extension of the subway lines. A Council for Sustainable Cities is established with a mandate to contribute to the long-term development of sustainable cities. The responsibility for implementing the policy for sustainable urban development lies with several authorities, and a council assembles them to drive SDG 11, including by promoting sustainable infrastructure. The target group for the council is Swedish municipalities. The council provides capacity building and collects knowledge and information on financing for sustainable urban development. And this council is an arena for transport efficient city planning, smart city development, and support for socially sustainable cities. The council provides a guideline for municipal green planning. Planning and infrastructure development in Sweden is a shared responsibility between municipalities and the state. And these entities play complementary roles. Municipalities also have to ensure transparent and public information about new projects and development, and to enable public participation in development that impact local communities. With this brief description, Madam Chairwoman, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to raise these points at this meeting, and underlining again that sharing experiences between countries, between regions, between municipalities is absolutely essential for all of us to be able to reach our sustainability goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and a very concrete example of a cooperation at the national level and the local governments, and between these two levels, but also to share internationally with the other countries. This is a good example. Thank you. I would like to now invite Ms. Nino Tandishvili, Deputy Minister of Environment from Georgia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Kumi. It is again a pleasure to participate during this session. We had a wonderful discussion during the panel discussions, and this continues because the topic is very important itself, and to sharing the experience, and also to identifying the important aspects that is very relevant for the development of sustainable infrastructure is crucial, especially within the current climate change process. As we observe, number of new parameters which makes infrastructure more vulnerable towards the climate risks. And referring to the sustainable infrastructure, where along with the technical and other aspects, social, economic, and environmental ones must be considered, it is almost impossible to perform effectively without continuous innovation tools as well. In this respect, I would like to bring the example of Georgia, because to increase adaptive capacity and create climate resilient infrastructure, Georgia, through the support of the Green Climate Fund, is implementing the one of the largest 7-year program, which is related to the reducing risk of climate-driven disasters in Georgia. This is mainly related to the climate change adaptation aspects. Program actually targets hard and soft infrastructural development for increasing monitoring capacities on natural hazards. And we are, of course, in the process of increasing hydrometeorological and geological monitoring network stations. When it comes to the hard infrastructure, there are also 15 flood preventive structural measures that are implemented in 10 municipalities around Georgia. Moreover, it is crucially important to have sufficient natural hazard maps that can be used for the development of particular infrastructural projects. As their usage for the spatial planning is becoming more and more crucial within these times of climate change challenges. And it is very important that the implementation of this project for Georgia will actually support to enhance the knowledge, capacity, and effective cooperation as well among all the relevant institutions, starting from the central administrations, going to the municipal and community levels. Because when we are talking about the development of sustainable infrastructure, integrated approaches are becoming more and more important. And of course, as a last point, I would like to highlight that without having proper hazard mapping systems available at the local level, it is hard to plan the infrastructural development that could be climate resilient and that could protect the citizens and local inhabitants. But in this process, awareness raising is also one of the important and key aspects. That's very briefly. For giving me the opportunity to intervene.
Yeah, thank you very much. And recognizing again the importance of data and hazard mappings, information basis to make good decision in the planning upfront. It's not all just about building hard infrastructure, and also the importance of soft infrastructure like data collection, monitoring, very, very important. So thank you for sharing that as concrete example. Next, we have some pre-announced speakers. We have Deputy Minister Yardanka Rodica Yadona from Moldova. She's the State Secretary, of Moldova. You have the floor.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and I would like to mention that the infrastructure is crucial for development and is vessel for community life and provide services to enable society for function and joint well-being. A key infrastructure challenges in Moldova is the disparity between rural and urban areas. Access to adequate infrastructure services such as clean piped water, transportation services, electricity, and district heating differs widely between cities and urban areas, especially villages, which we have in the Republic of Moldova. For instance, only about 10% of the rural residents in Moldova have access to modern heating compared with nearly 80% in urban areas. The disparity is a particularly acute problem in Moldova, the least urbanized country in the Eastern European Partnership, since such a large share of this population. From the results of 2019, above 57% of the population lives in the rural areas. So, as you can understand, this is quite important issue for us to have these equal opportunities for rural and urban people to have access to water, transport, heatings, and so on. For a country with its size as Moldova, has a relatively extensive network of transport infrastructure, but we need to mention that the Soviet era stock of assets has suffered from underinvestment and insufficient maintenance, leading to suboptimal services delivery, particularly in rural areas. However, we have some experience at this moment in using the bonds services. For example, in municipalities as Chisinau, the new transport were procured, but this is especially for the urban areas, but not for the rural areas. To improve sustainability and to diversify energy sources, Moldova also aims to develop renewable generation. Moldova also aims to reduce the energy intensity of its economy and improve the efficiency of its building stock, stocks and transmissions and distribution system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very important reminder. We started talking about urban aspects, but also access for rural population for all the services provided by infrastructure is very, very important. So thank you for sharing that. We had a speaker who was not able to speak in the plenary because of lack of time. And so we would now like to call on Mr. Joe Giralde from Council of Europe, who could not intervene due to lack of time in the previous plenary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, colleagues. In 2020, the Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe highlighted the role of the Council in mainstreaming the environmental dimension into human rights and to pursue a rights-based approach to environmental protection. So this meeting, Madam Chair, is very much at heart with the vision and actions of the Council of Europe. Climate change is a threat to us all, but as with COVID-19 pandemic, it hits hardest the most vulnerable and marginalized people. And this is the essence of my contribution this morning. It is crucial, therefore, that the transition leaves no one behind. In this regard, macroeconomic models, fiscal and labor protection systems, as well as society itself needs to come up with new responses to these new challenges. This means that we have to find ways to re-empowering people as much as possible to play a positive role as active citizens, nurturing new lifestyles, applying sustainable consumption patterns, and enabling access to technology and resources. Therefore, it is imperative to have a just transition that addresses both the employment situation and the distributional effects of a shift to climate neutrality. This should be dealt with as an integral part of climate policy framework and not simply as a corrective measure. These issues need to work their way across several policy domains, such as distributional effects of decarbonization policies, employment transitions and loss of jobs, the protection of social rights, as well as the inclusion of citizens and civil society in decision-making. If transition is to have a degree of legitimacy and support by society, it must put people first, wherever they are, while paying attention to vulnerable regions, the industries that may be hit hard, and the workers who would need to transition to other occupations. Putting it bluntly, we have to make sure that the cost of transition is not to be borne by the most vulnerable. In this regard, social policy related to the transition should not be limited to training and education only, but looks into the broader distribution effects of climate policy, such as affordable and low emissions transport and mobility options, and more general social protection and social inclusion. In this regard, I borrow a sentence from the note of the UNECE, dated 27 July of this year, where it stated that if sustainable infrastructure is designed taking into account public participation and the stakeholder engagement process, this can facilitate inclusive infrastructure projects that generate economic benefits for all citizens, especially those with low incomes. So, putting the well-being of people first and making sure that no one is left behind, but able to share the benefits of the new economic system, is the litmus test of an infrastructure that is sustainable. Our survival depends on getting it right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for this reminder. You know, the social aspect and the just transition aspect is very important as we aim to shift our energy, transport, and other infrastructure to align with Paris and other goals. So thank you for that. Next, we have a flag up for Switzerland. Madam State Secretary, Mrs. Schonenberger. I hope I said it correctly. You have the floor next.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, infrastructure is central for the achievement of our climate objectives and the SDGs. At the same time, infrastructure requires massive extraction of minerals with important environmental impacts. Ladies and gentlemen, the choices we make today are critical. This is because 75% of the infrastructure we need by 2050 still has to be built, and because infrastructure lasts for decades. At the global level, at the last United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA, member states renewed their call to promote sustainable infrastructure on the one hand, and environmental sustainability of minerals on the other hand, with the adoption of 2 resolutions. They also welcomed the international principles for sustainable infrastructure launched at UNEA. In the pan-European region, we should work together towards the implementation of these principles. The Nicosia follow-up gives us this opportunity. Now let me address one of the guiding questions of how to strike a balance between the social, environmental, and economic aspects of infrastructure development. I can refer to one of the voluntary commitments announced by Switzerland in Nicosia. In 2019, an interministerial coordination unit has been established to promote the use of high sustainability standards in infrastructure projects. One such standard is the SURE standard, and SURE stands for Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure. So one of such standards is the SURE standard, to be used in the planification, realization, and maintenance of infrastructure. The SURE standard takes all 3 dimensions of sustainable development into account and integrates requirements of multilateral environmental agreements. To conclude, as experts say, we need to move from doing the right infrastructure to doing the infrastructure right. And that involves more stakeholders than what we were used to work with. So let's put all hands on deck to build the sustainable world and the sustainable infrastructure we need. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam State Secretary, and for the very important reminder how the critical minerals and is very much linked to enabling the sustainable infrastructure development, maybe notably in renewable energy technologies, but probably beyond as well. So thank you very much for that important reminder. Next, we would like to call on a colleague in the corner, raising your flag, Mr. Mario Seljuk. He's a State Secretary for Croatia. Mr. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all organizers for organizing this very important and interesting meeting at the very right time. Our infrastructure is exposed to great pressure from climate change, and economic losses exceed 0.25% of GDP. Croatia does find itself at very top among EU member states. The most significant barriers to the implementation of sustainable infrastructure solutions is insufficient knowledge on the latest climate change development in person who are in charge of project preparation. Significant issues at our national level are climate change studies, maps, and data, since the existing resolution of climate model are not of sufficient quality for detailed planning and determination of climate change risks. In the last few years, the environmental impact assessment and strategic environmental assessment procedures have improved in Croatia. The concept of climate proofing is applied more seriously, even though it is still voluntary. continued application and integration of the EU taxonomy regulation and the not significant harm principle will create new opportunities for faster, better, and smarter planning, funding, and implementation. The international and national standards in the field of construction have to be updated in relation to greenhouse gas emission and climate change resilience. Then they need to be put into practice through national legislation. At the same time, through environmental impact assessment procedure, infrastructure projects are aligned with climate requirements. Croatia is currently preparing its national guidelines to harmonize this approach. Furthermore, we use funds from the National Environmental Protection and Energy Efficiency Fund to co-finance climate change adaptation measures in local self-government units with an emphasis on the development of green infrastructure in the urban areas. On the other hand, we also see a lot of potential in nature-based solutions. Allow me to mention the example of NBS in the flood defense system of the city of Zagreb and central Croatia, where natural flood areas are used as retention areas. Retention areas serve as temporary storaging of water that is subtracted from the discharge of the river canal. At the same time, these areas are significant for nature conservation and therefore part of the Natura 2000 ecological network. This model enabled coexistence of the local population and their traditional practices with nature through extensive agriculture and nature conservation activities. Let me finally conclude and highlight the importance of the application of the not significant harm principle. This principle should further contribute to ensuring sustainability and prioritization of green projects. It was introduced in Croatia as mandatory for all projects financed from the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, including planned infrastructure projects. Thank you, and I wish all of you every success and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing example from Croatia. Now I'd like to give the floor back to my dear co-chair to say a few words of wrap up, and we must close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear friends, for being very good with the timing. We didn't have much time, but I will try to wrap up and really make a few notes from what I heard. Thank you very much, first of all, for sharing with us your experience. From what we heard, there are several things which I would like to highlight. The first thing is that it is important to integrate the smart solutions for infrastructure. So be it, for example, smart transport system, be it smart buildings and so on. So the smart solutions are very key. Second is it is important to make sure that we do create that we do enable horizontal and vertical interaction at different in the government and also between the countries. So if we are talking about the municipalities, there should be exchanges at the municipal level, but also exchanges between municipalities and the central government level, and also at the central government level. So this is also key in enabling sustainable infrastructure. Third, that we heard is that the data and monitoring are extremely important to inform the designing climate resilient infrastructure, since the climate change is becoming more acute problem, and it is and it's really creating huge risks and huge externalities to our economies and also our infrastructure. Of course, really monitoring and really providing the data to inform the decision making in regard to infrastructure is important. There was also the integrated approaches were also mentioned in this respect. Fourth, inclusivity and equal access to infrastructure, technologies, resources, as well as solutions were also mentioned a few times. Doing infrastructure right. This is, I think, the idea that I liked a lot, really moving away from doing right infrastructure towards doing infrastructure right. Awareness raising on the risks of climate change, in general, awareness raising is important of all those who are involved in decision-making process. Most of the time we talk about the decision makers who are in the government, but it's not always the government, let's say, authorities or civil public servants, but also for example, construction companies. They should be really well aware of the risks that are stemming from climate change, and they should be really integrating this awareness into their decision making. Integration of climate change to the standards and also the requirements for planning. So if this was also mentioned as one of the solutions, if we are providing for the requirements to the, for example, construction companies or others, and we're saying we're going to provide you additional funds if you are making sure that you're integrating that or something else in respect to towards making your infrastructure more sustainable, then I think that would be really facilitating building more sustainable infrastructure. And also nature-based solutions. I think nature-based solutions are quite underestimated, and maybe we're not really using them as much. However, they are the cheapest solutions and they are the most sustainable solutions, and they can really help us to minimize the risks that are coming from, especially from climate change. So I think I will stop here, but also I like the idea that the transition to sustainable infrastructure should not be borne by the most vulnerable. And someone mentioned from the speakers the idea that I was mentioning at the beginning. We need to, when we are speaking about sustainable infrastructure, we really have to think how to address the time gap and the price gap, because the sustainable infrastructure, it might be more expensive. However, in the long term, in 50 years, it's basically cheaper and it's better, it's more efficient. However, we need to do the upfront investments. So sometimes it might be extremely difficult to make the right decision. So in that respect, I think we really have to think from the social inclusion perspective, in that these might be facilitating the hard choices and not very popular sometimes decisions. So thank you all very much for your inputs, for your contributions. I think we did very well in terms of time. We had only until 1 p.m. It's 1:05. So if my dear co-moderator would like to add anything, if not, then I think we will be wrapping up this session. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.